Welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I'm Karen E. Osborne. I hope you know that by now because you've been watching all of these videos. I was chatting with a friend yesterday and I said, what did you think about last week's? And she said, I'm going to get to it. So I hope that you're getting to most of them because they've been so enjoyable. And I'm very excited about my multi-talented guest that I have today. I am the author of Getting It Right and Tangled Lies, which came out in July, and Reckonings, which is coming out next June. And my guest today is Brian Orner. And he is a photographer and an artist and a writer. So I think you're going to find this conversation really interesting. And let me just tell you just a little bit about him, and then he'll tell you all about himself. So he is the author, besides being a photographer and artist, he wrote a novel called Sostenuto. And this is the description: a genre-defying novel with elements of sci-fi, mystery, mythology, thriller, religion and spirituality, historical fiction, and oh, by the way, environmentalism, right? Does that sound cool or what? Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. It's very good to be here.
I'm so glad that you could join us today. So let's start with, the question that I'd like to start with is that you have this, I went to your website, and you have such beautiful art and photography on there. And then you have your books. So tell us a little bit about your artistic journey. You know, how did all of these things come together?
So for me, it's been kind of an organic development. I didn't start out that way. I kind of started in a kind of a right-brained fashion doing computer programming and that kind of thing. And it was really not until about I would say in my mid-30s, when I began to detect an interest in the arts in terms of actually being creative. And so, I got a digital camera and I started experimenting there. And that just kind of developed slowly over time, organically. And I developed a style that seemed to interest me and to work. So it's not a particularly interesting story in a way. It's just a kind of an ordinary progression of things, and I have just kept at it because I like to do it very much.
Yeah. And where did the writing come in? When did you start writing on that journey?
Well, I've been writing my whole life, and I knew from an early age that I wanted to be a writer. Um, I I sort of got my official kickoff, for lack of a better term, when I was in college, when I turned in an essay that had been assigned, and it came back from the professor with a C minus, and
Oh,
the, and the professor had written a note saying, "This is very good. In fact, it's so good that I don't believe you wrote it. I just can't prove that you plagiarized it." And so I was really upset. So I got all my books and my notes and my cards, and I marched into his office and dropped them on his desk and said, and he didn't even ask questions. He took the paper back and crossed it out and gave me an A. And he said, I couldn't prove it. I wanted to put the ball in your court and see what you would do with it. And in retrospect, I'm not sure that was a great method, but it worked. So I decided maybe there was something there, and I have been working on it ever since.
wow. That's the opposite of the encouraging teacher story, who
It really
somebody
is.
says, oh my goodness, this is so beautiful. This is so beautiful. I think you plagiarized it. Yikes.
Yeah, it's what happened.
As you said, it worked because it got you moving forward. So when you were a kid, were you a reader as a kid?
Yes, I read voraciously.
Yeah. So how did that? Your book has so many different genres blended in. Tell me what kind of reader you were as a kid, and how that did or didn't influence the writer that you are today.
Well, I think, like most children, perhaps the thing about reading that I loved was the kind of escapist aspect of it. It
Mm.
was a chance to enter another world and live there for a while. I loved science fiction. That's mostly what I went after. So I read everything that Arthur C. Clarke ever wrote. I loved Harlan Ellison, who wrote a lot of different kinds of things. He actually wrote a Star Trek episode. Um,
Hmm.
City on the Edge of Forever, I believe, is what he wrote. Um, Carlos Castaneda, who was a Yaqui Toltec, and he just did a series of books that just mesmerized me. Took me into a world about which I knew nothing, and so I always had a book in my hand from my early days, and it was mostly science fiction, more escapist kinds of things, uh, world building kinds of authors.
Yes, we've had quite a few world builders on this show. It's such an interesting pursuit that you have to think through. I mean, I think of myself that I build a world, but it's a little tiny town, with people in it. But world building is a big thing. So
Yeah.
I admire that. So you were a sci-fi reader, and you decided to tackle this novel that's much more than sci-fi. It's got all kinds of other. Tell us a little bit about your novel.
Yeah, well, I had for many years decided that I was intent upon writing, the great American novel, whatever that means, and I put it off and I put it off and put it off until finally an event happened in my life that made it clear that I needed to do it, and so I just decided to start. And I'd been around for a few years at that point, and the way that I work is to just start writing and allow the narrative to take me where it takes me. And so life is complex, and it turned out that there are a lot of different things that went in to the novel simply for that reason. And so it's very hard to define it in one particular genre or another because there's so many different kinds of things in it. That's just because life is complicated, and it's a large kind of a slice of life exploration.
Hmm. So what's the basic story? Just the basic.
It's about a gentleman
There's
who's very.
somebody behind you. There's somebody lurking behind you who's in our picture.
Yeah. Um, Sorry about that. Um,
Right.
I it's about a small number of people who have a number of interactions. One in particular, the kind of our hero, is a man who's quite old, and he has developed an extraordinary capacity for attention, and an unusual ability to read people, to understand what is motivating them, what predictions, make predictions about where they might go and what they might do. It's Holmesian in that way. But whereas Sherlock Holmes was very much oriented towards facts and deductions about things in the world, his is more psychological. He's really focusing on people, reading them and trying to understand them. And uh, the narrative arises out of the belief that I have that um, the way that we human beings manifest in the world is really a kind of a small subset of what we might be capable of.
Mm.
And and the wish to explore how that might be developed in whatever way that might be possible for any person. In his case, it's a capacity for extraordinary attention, and that leads him into all kinds of trouble, honestly. And anyway, that was the genesis of the idea, and the book developed from there.
Yeah. Well, getting into all kinds of trouble is what helps us turn the pages, right? So that's always good when our hero gets into lots of trouble because that keeps our readers, gripped. So, what's your writing routine? And are you working on anything now?
Yes, I'm working on a couple of things right now. For me, it comes and goes. I go through periods where I write a lot, and then periods where I don't write for a while. Um, one of the things I love to do is write letters. I write letters to friends all over the world, actually. And when I decide to sit down and write somebody, it's often very long, 10 pages, single spaced about something. And it turns out that that's a way of clarifying my thinking on things. I can't remember. I think it was somebody said writing is God's way of showing you how disorganized your thinking is. I think that might have been Ignatius of Loyola, uh, uh, but I'm not sure. Anyway, it's cathartic for me in that way. It forces me to get my facts in order and to understand what I think and why I think it. And then the result is somebody gets a letter, and that is often the genesis for something further, perhaps in a novel or an essay of some kind.
Do
At the
people
moment,
write you back? Do
excuse
people
me.
write you back? Do the people you send letters to, do they write you back?
Letter writing is a dying art. Let's put it that way.
Yes, it is. So
Uh,
you're saying you're working on.
I'm working on a collection of essays right now
Ah,
that I've been putting together for the past 10 years. So,
nice. Very nice. So if our viewers wanted to learn more about you, look at his gorgeous, gorgeous art and photography, as well as he has things about the book, about the novel, about the characters in the novel. So if they wanted to find you, how would they find you?
well, I have a website at www.brianorner.com, and that contains just about everything that I've done, books and artwork of various kinds, and that would be a good place to start.
Excellent. And is there a contact you there if they wanted to ask you a question or?
Yes.
Excellent. So you can meet Brian, you can look at his art, you can look at his books, his writing, his essays. You can just see all the things that he has done on his artistic journey, and you can be in touch with him. If you would like to be in touch with me, you can find me at KarenEosborne.com. You can find me on Facebook, Karen E. Osborne Author. I'm on LinkedIn every day. I'm on Twitter every day. I'm on Instagram most days. And you got to remember the E, because there are other Karen Osbornes out there in the world. So I'm Karen E. Osborne. We thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and that you'll be back for the next episode of What Are You Reading? Oh, what are you reading? I didn't even ask you. Do you have a book recommendation?
Well, sure. I'm at the moment I'm reading a book by Johnathan Haidt called The Righteous Mind, which is an analysis of why it's so difficult for us to get along and how we might do better in areas of things like religion and politics. So it's a nonfiction book.
Oh, and very timely, I would
Yeah.
say. Very timely. All right, so come back to us for the next episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Have a great day.